The classroom door slammed shut, and my heart stopped. I was 17, drowning in the weight of a secret I hadn't yet named, when Mr. Callahan's voice, low, deliberate, dangerous, pinned me to my seat. "Elliot, stay after class," he said, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't read, something that made my pulse race with both fear and a strange, forbidden thrill. It was 1999, in a small, conservative town in Ohio, where the air smelled of cornfields and conformity. Westbridge High was a brick fortress of whispered judgments, where being different wasn't just frowned upon, it was a crime. I was a senior, lanky and quiet, with a mop of sandy hair and a habit of sketching in the margins of my notebooks instead of paying attention. I wasn't like the other guys who bragged about their football stats or the girls they'd hooked up with at bonfires. I didn't fit, and I knew it, but I didn't know why until Mr. Callahan walked into my life. Mr. Callahan, James, as he'd later insist I call him, was the new English teacher, barely 25, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like a storm over Lake Erie. He wasn't like the other teachers, with their droning lectures and coffee-stained ties. He quoted Whitman and Dickinson with a fire that made words feel alive, like they could cut through the haze of my teenage confusion. He saw me sketching one day, a sketch of a boy's face, half hidden in shadow, and instead of scolding me, he leaned over my desk, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "You've got a gift, Elliot. Don't hide it." That moment changed everything. It was the first time someone saw me. Not the awkward kid who tripped over his own feet, but the person I was too scared to admit I was. I started staying after class, at first to talk about poetry, then about life, dreams, and the things we didn't dare say aloud. James had a way of listening that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He'd lean back in his chair, his sleeves rolled up, and ask questions that peeled back my defenses. "What do you want, Elliot? What are you afraid of?" I didn't have answers, but I wanted to find them. For him. By October, the air between us crackled. We'd linger in the empty classroom, the chalk dust settling like snow, and talk until the janitor's keys jingled in the hall. One day, as the sun bled orange through the blinds, James handed me a worn copy of Leaves of Grass. "Read it," he said, his fingers brushing mine. "Find yourself in it." That night, I read until my eyes burned, Whitman's words igniting something in me. A longing I couldn't name but felt in every bone. I was falling for him, and it terrified me. The town wasn't blind. Rumors spread like wildfire in Westbridge, and by November, whispers followed me down the halls. "Elliot's always with Mr. Callahan. What's going on in that classroom?" My best friend, Sarah, warned me to be careful. "People talk, Elle," she said, her brown eyes wide with worry. "They're saying things about you too." I laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. I wasn't ready to face what those whispers meant. Not about James, not about myself. Then came the day that broke me open. It was a Friday, the classroom empty except for us. James was grading papers, and I was pretending to read, stealing glances at him. He caught me staring, and instead of looking away, he smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made my chest ache. "Elliot," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "What are you so afraid of?" Before I could answer, he stood, crossed the room, and closed the distance between us. His hand grazed my cheek, and for one heartbeat, the world stopped. He kissed me. It was quick, tentative, like he was testing the air between us, but it set my blood on fire. I froze, my mind screaming that this was wrong, dangerous, impossible. But my body leaned into him, desperate for more. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine, and I saw fear there, too. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have." But I didn't let him finish. I kissed him back, harder, reckless, and for a moment, nothing else existed. We didn't hear the door open. We didn't hear the gasp until it was too late. Mrs. Hargrove, the history teacher, stood frozen in the doorway, her face a mask of horror. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice trembling with disgust. James stepped back, his hands raised, but the damage was done. She stormed out, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that our secret was no longer ours. That night, I lay awake, replaying the kiss, the look in James's eyes, the venom in Mrs. Hargrove's voice. I was 17, in love with my teacher, and the world was about to tear us apart. What had I done? And what would I do when the truth came crashing down? The fallout came faster than I could brace for. By Monday, the school buzzed with whispers, each one sharper than the last. I walked into Westbridge High feeling like a criminal, every glance a judgment, every hushed conversation a blade. Sarah pulled me aside before first period, her voice low. "Elliot, they're saying you and Mr. Callahan, you know." Her words hung heavy, and I couldn't meet her eyes. I mumbled something about it being a misunderstanding, but the lie tasted bitter. There was no misunderstanding what had happened in that classroom. James wasn't at school that day. His absence was a void, a confirmation of the rumors. I overheard teachers in the lounge, their voices dripping with disdain. "Inappropriate conduct," one said. "He should be fired," another spat. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream that it wasn't just him, it was me, too. Kissed him back. But I stayed silent, shrinking into myself, sketching furiously in my notebook to keep my hands from shaking. By lunch, the principal, Mr. Dawson, called me into his office. He was a stern man, with a gray mustache and a voice like gravel. "Elliot," he said, leaning forward, "we need to know exactly what happened between you and Mr. Callahan." His eyes bored into me, and I felt like I was drowning. I stammered out a half-truth. We'd been close, we'd talked a lot, but nothing more. I couldn't bring myself to say the rest. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted to protect James. Dawson didn't believe me. "This is serious, son," he said. "There will be consequences." That night, I went to James's apartment. It was a risky move, but I couldn't breathe without knowing he was okay. He lived in a small, brick building on the edge of town, the kind of place that looked like it had seen better days. When he opened the door, he looked wrecked. His hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. "Elliot, you shouldn't be here," he said, but he let me in anyway. The room smelled of coffee and old books, and I saw leaves of grass on his coffee table, dog-eared and worn. We sat on his couch, the space between us heavy with everything unsaid. "They're investigating me," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Hargrove reported us. I could lose my job, my license, everything." I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I'd fix it, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. "I don't regret it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But we can't do this, Elliot. Not here. Not now." I wanted to argue, to tell him we could run away, start over somewhere no one knew us. But I was 17, with no money and no plan, and the weight of reality crushed that fantasy. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice breaking. He didn't answer, just pulled me close, and for a moment, I let myself believe we could hold on to this, even as the world closed in. The next day, the school board called an emergency meeting. James was suspended pending investigation, and I was told to stay away from him. My parents, who'd always been distant but kind, were furious when they found out. "What were you thinking, Elliot?" my dad shouted, his face red. "He's your teacher." My mom just cried, and I hated myself for hurting them. But I hated the town more. Its small-mindedness, its suffocating rules. I started sneaking out to see James at night, climbing the fire escape to his apartment. We'd sit on his tiny balcony, whispering under the stars, planning a future we both knew was impossible. He told me about growing up in Chicago, hiding who he was to survive. "I saw you, Elliot," he said one night, his hand brushing my cheek. "I saw myself in you, and I couldn't look away." Those words burned into me, a mix of love and pain I didn't know how to carry. But the town wouldn't let us be. One night, as I left James's place, I saw a car parked across the street, its headlights off. The next day, Sarah told me her dad, a cop, had heard about suspicious activity at James's apartment. "They're watching him, Elle," she said. "You need to stop." I didn't listen. Couldn't. Every moment with James felt like stealing time from a world that wanted to erase us. By December, the investigation escalated. The school board called me in again, this time with a lawyer present. They asked questions I couldn't dodge. "Did he touch you? Did he coerce you?" I stuck to my story, but the truth was slipping through my fingers. I saw the way they looked at me, like I was broken, like I needed fixing. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a victim, that what I felt for James was real, but no one would listen. One night, James called me, his voice urgent. "Meet me at the park," he said. "We need to talk." I slipped out, my heart pounding, and found him by the lake, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. He looked older, worn down by the weight of our secret. "They're going to fire me," he said, "and they might come after you next." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What are you saying?" I asked, dread pooling in my chest. He took my hands, his grip tight. "I'm leaving, Elliot. I have to." The words hit like a punch. Leaving. James was leaving, and I was losing the one person who'd ever seen me for who I was. I stood there by the lake, the cold December air biting my skin, and all I could think was that I'd never survive this. "Where will you go?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the wind. He didn't answer, just pulled me into his arms, and I clung to him, memorizing the feel of his jacket, the scent of his cologne, the way his breath warmed my neck. "I'll go to Chicago," he said finally. "I have friends there, people who won't care about this." He gestured vaguely, meaning us, meaning the love we weren't allowed to have. "Come with me?" I blurted out, desperate. He shook his head, his eyes glistening. "You're 17, Elliot. You have a life here, a future. I can't take that from you." I wanted to argue, to tell him my future was with him, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He was trying to protect me, even if it meant breaking us both. The next week was a blur of pain. James was officially fired, the school board citing gross misconduct. The town turned him into a villain, a predator who'd taken advantage of a student. They didn't know about the nights we'd spent talking about poetry, or how he'd made me feel like I could be someone. They didn't know I loved him. The school, I was a pariah. Kids who'd once ignored me now sneered, calling me names I won't repeat. Sarah stuck by me, but even she couldn't hide her worry. "You're not eating, Elle?" she said one day, pushing a sandwich toward me. I couldn't tell her I'd lost my appetite for everything. I kept sneaking to James's apartment, even as the rumors grew uglier. One night, I found him packing, his books and clothes stuffed into boxes. "You can't leave yet," I said, panic rising. He stopped, his shoulders slumping, and crossed the room to me. "Elliot, this town will destroy you if you stay tied to me," he said. "You're stronger than this place. You'll find your way." He kissed me then, slow and deep, and it felt like a goodbye. I hated him for it, even as I kissed him back. The night before he left, we met at the park again. He gave me a letter, folded tightly, and told me not to read it until he was gone. "Promise me you'll keep going," he said, his voice breaking. "Promise me you'll be you, no matter what they say." I nodded, tears streaming down my face, and watched him walk away, his figure fading into the dark. The next morning, he was gone. His apartment was empty. The school had a new English teacher, and I was alone with a secret that burned in my chest. I read his letter that night, my hands shaking. It was short, written in his neat, slanted handwriting. "Elliot, you gave me courage I didn't know I had. Live bravely for both of us. James." I cried until I couldn't breathe, then hid the letter in my desk, where no one would find it. Life at Westbridge High became unbearable. The rumors didn't stop, and neither did the stares. My parents sent me to a therapist, a stern woman who talked about healing and moving on. I nodded through her sessions, but inside, I was screaming. I missed James so much it felt like a physical wound. I stopped sketching, stopped caring, stopped feeling anything but anger and loss. But something shifted in the spring. Sarah dragged me to an art show in Columbus, a 2-hour drive from Westbridge. There, among the paintings and sculptures, I saw a piece that stopped me cold. A canvas of 2 figures, their faces blurred, holding hands under a stormy sky. The plaque read, "For he who taught me to see." I knew it was James's work, even without his name. He was out there, living, creating, and it gave me a flicker of hope. I started drawing again, pouring my pain into every line. I sketched James's face, the classroom, the lake, every moment we'd shared. My art became my rebellion, my way of saying I wasn't ashamed of who I was. I came out to Sarah first, then my parents, who didn't understand but didn't disown me. It was a start. By graduation, I'd decided to leave Westbridge for good. I applied to art school in Chicago, telling myself it wasn't about chasing James, but knowing deep down it was. Chicago was a shock to my system. After the stifling quiet of Westbridge, the city's pulse, its honking cabs, crowded sidewalks, and neon nights, felt like waking up from a coma. I was 18 now, a freshman at the Art Institute, living in a cramped dorm with a roommate who blasted techno at 3 a.m. But I didn't care. I was free, or at least freer than I'd ever been. Every sketch I made, every stroke of charcoal, was a step toward reclaiming myself. Yet James's shadow lingered in every corner of my heart. I didn't look for him at first. I told myself I'd moved on, that I was here for art, not for him. But late at night, when the dorm was quiet, I'd reread his letter, tracing the words until they blurred. Live bravely for both of us. I wanted to, but bravery felt like a foreign language. I was still the kid from Ohio, scared of being seen, scared of being heard again. My first year was a whirlwind of classes, critiques, and coffee-fueled all-nighters. I made friends, other misfits who saw the world through paint and clay, and slowly started to feel like I belonged. One friend, Mia, a sculptor with a shaved head and a laugh like a firecracker, pushed me to show my work. "Your sketches have soul, Elliot," she said. "Stop hiding them." I started entering student exhibitions, and to my surprise, people noticed. My pieces, raw, emotional scenes of love and loss, drew crowds, whispers, even awards. But the past wasn't done with me. One rainy afternoon in my sophomore year, I saw a flyer for a local art gallery opening. The name caught my eye, James Callahan, New Works. My heart lurched. I hadn't heard his name in 2 years, but it still felt like a live wire. I went to the gallery alone, my hands shaking as I pushed open the door. The space was small, warm, filled with paintings of stormy skies and shadowed figures. And there he was, James, older but unmistakable, talking to a group of people, his smile as disarming as ever. I hung back, watching him, torn between running and staying. He hadn't seen me yet, but every painting screamed our story. The classroom, the lake, the moment we'd kissed. One piece, a small canvas of 2 hands intertwined, had a title that gutted me. "For E Always." I was about to leave when he turned, and our eyes met. The room fell away. He excused himself and walked over, his expression a mix of shock and something softer, something like relief. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, familiar. "You're here." I nodded, unable to speak. We stepped outside, the rain soaking us, and talked for hours. He told me about his life in Chicago, teaching art classes, painting, trying to rebuild after Westbridge. "I never stopped thinking about you," he admitted, and I felt the old ache flare up. I told him about art school, my work, how his letter had kept me going. "I'm trying to be brave," I said, my voice cracking. He smiled, his hand brushing mine, and for a moment, it was like no time had passed. But we weren't the same. He was 30 now, a man with a life I wasn't part of. I was 20, still figuring out who I was. We walked along the lakefront, the city lights reflecting on the water, and he told me he'd never meant to hurt me. "I was reckless," he said. I should have protected you better. I shook my head. You woke me up, James. You made me see myself. We didn't kiss, didn't cross that line again, but we held on to each other, a quiet acknowledgement of what we'd been. After that night, we kept in touch, cautious, careful, like two people handling something fragile. I focused on my art, pouring my story into every piece. By my senior year, I had a solo show and James came. He stood in the back, watching me talk about my work, and I saw pride in his eyes. My final piece was a triptych: a classroom, a lake, a city skyline. The plaque read, "To Jay who taught me to see." He smiled when he saw it, and I knew he understood. Graduation came, and with it, a sense of closure I hadn't expected. I was 22, a degree in hand, a portfolio that told my story, and a heart still mending from the weight of first love. Chicago had become my home, a place where I could be myself without fear. But the scars of Westbridge lingered, a reminder of the boy who'd walked into that classroom and the man I'd become. James and I never got back together, not in the way I'd once dreamed. Our love had been real, but it was born in a time and place that couldn't hold it. Instead, we built something new, a friendship rooted in shared pain and mutual respect. We'd meet for coffee sometimes, talking about art, life, and the people we'd become. He was dating someone now, a kind man who made him laugh, and I was happy for him, even if it stung. I was finding my own way, too, dating here and there, learning what it meant to love without hiding. My art became my voice. After graduation, I landed a job teaching art to kids in a community center, and I poured everything I'd learned from James into it. I told my students to be fearless, to create from their hearts, to never let anyone tell them who they should be. One day, a shy boy showed me a sketch of two boys holding hands, his cheeks red with embarrassment. I smiled, remembering myself at his age, and said, "That's beautiful. Keep going." He beamed, and I felt James's words echo in me. Live bravely. Years later, I got a call from Sarah. She'd left Westbridge, too, and was living in New York working as a journalist. "They're tearing down Westbridge High," she said. "Thought you'd want to know." I flew back to Ohio, standing in the empty lot where the school once stood. The classroom was gone, but the memories weren't. I could still see James at the chalkboard, hear his voice quoting Whitman, feel the thrill of his hand on mine. I wasn't that scared kid anymore, but I carried him with me just as I carried James. I went to the lake that night, the place where we'd said goodbye. The water was still, reflecting the stars, and I pulled out a sketchbook. I drew us, two figures, young and unafraid, standing together under a stormy sky. It wasn't about holding onto the past. It was about honoring it. I tucked the sketch into my bag and walked away, feeling lighter than I had in years. Back in Chicago, I started a new project, a series of paintings about love, loss, and the courage to be seen. The centerpiece was a canvas of a classroom, empty except for a book on a desk, Leaves of Grass. The plaque read, "For J and E who found themselves." It was my way of closing the chapter, of saying thank you to the man who'd changed me, and to the boy who'd survived. The secret that once burned in my memory no longer felt like a wound. It was a spark, a reminder of what I'd fought for, what I'd become. I was Elliot, an artist, a teacher, a man who loved fiercely and lived bravely. And somewhere I knew James was doing the same. Our story wasn't a tragedy. It was a beginning, a testament to the power of love to break us open and make us whole.